Hey guys, welcome back. This is the Syntax Sorcerer here. Thank you guys for stopping by and watching my videos. Today we are going to do something really fun. It's going to be a little difficult for some of my beginners, but that's okay. That's kind of what these classes are for. I just want you to understand that we're going to be going over a lot of terminology today. There's going to be programming, but we're not going to do as much programming today. This is going to be maybe 3 or 4 parts where we just keep tacking on to this program we're going to write, because we're doing so much like learning of the terminology. And some of you are going to get very frustrated, very flustered, like what's this, what's that. It will all come together at the very end of this like 4-part series. So just bear with me on that. I'm going to explain as much as I can. And if something's not explained well, please go ahead, let me know in the comments and I'll try to clarify things. But yeah, let's hop into it. So today we are getting into OOP, or object-oriented programming. What does this mean? Well, object-oriented programming is a model of programming that centers around data, or what we're going to call objects. So, normally when we were writing programs earlier, the little code we did, we focused on functions and logic. So we are instead now focusing on objects. So no more function and logic, which means like the mathematics and just like printing out stuff. We weren't focused on the variables themselves, the objects themselves. We were focused on writing the algorithm and pumping out the information. So again, what does that mean? Programming. We're programming. That means focus more on like classes, objects, instance variables, properties, methods. And we've talked a little bit about all of these. For instance, classes, when we create a new integer, like we say int num1 equals 500. This is the class, and this is the object. And then this is the value we've assigned to that object, right? Instance variables are when we call the variables multiple times. So let's say we have int, let's use like sum for an instance, and we don't have a number we want to give it, because like later we're going to be like int num1 and then int num2, right? And then we're going to say int num 87. Oops, 87. We're just pretending as if we had gone down int num1 all the way to int number 87, right? We're just doing a couple of these. There, perfect. All right. So if I say, later we're going to create a different method for this, but if I say num1, plus num 87 equals sum, I need to be able to call different instances of this specific variable sum. Now, this is kind of a small example. It's going to get way more elaborate later, but this is just a quick example to give you an idea that I would have to call sum multiple times, and then I could say sum plus num2, right, equals sum. And now sum has been changed, and this technically isn't an instance of a variable, but you guys will catch on really quickly as to what we're going to go over here. So properties, we're going to go over that, and then methods. Again, we've already worked in a method before. Static main is a method. So before this, we were essentially just setting up a foundation for understanding the programming language basics, learning variables and whatnot. So now we're going to implement what we learned and more, and we're going to push forward with that knowledge. We're going to start using different methods. we're going to, just like we use main method, we're going to call those methods and send that data back to main. And a good example that I was taught about this was, how does calling a method work? Well, it's kind of almost exactly like it sounds. So main is going to call, let's call it the sum method, right? So main method and sum method. You see how main has the parentheses with its argument inside? Main method's going to call the sum method. Sum method's going to send num1 and num2. It'd be something like this. This is kind of pseudocode. It's going to add them up, and then it's going to send the total sum back to main, right? That's essentially what writing a new method does. It calls it. Main method's like, hey man, you got that sum, that total sum for me, and then sum does the summation of num1 and num2, takes those, does whatever it needs to do, and then sends that information back to main, and then main will then display output whatever we set main up to do. All right. So what we're gonna do today is, some of you are going to have a mild panic attack, but we are going to actually encapsulate our main in an example itself, and in a class itself. So if you can kind of see, it says internal class program. Like, this is just kind of a general thing that it says. I'm going to try changing this in a different way, and this might not make sense right away. So this is going to be a new class that is going to be outside of main, and might not make sense right away. Just bear with me. We will get there eventually. It's going to, like I said, everything's going to string together. All right. So I'm just going to give myself some lines here because I'm going to be typing quite a bit, and we're going to kind of go over it a little bit when we're typing it out, and then we're going to go over it more at the end. So again, it might not make sense right away. That's totally fine. You're going to be confused. Trust me, every programmer is always confused, especially when they have to go back, and kind of look at other people's code, or the first time you learn coding, it's always a difficult experience. All right, so we're going to start by displaying something. So I want to display the current user account name, initial name. We're just going to call it name. So we're going to do console.writeLine, and then we're going to say we're going to need to display a variable. And then we're going to use that, and we're going to say user account's name is user account dot get name. And some of you are probably having a mild panic attack right now.
Don't panic, printed in large, friendly letters on its cover.
And that is A-OK. And as you can see, there's a red squiggly line. It says this, for whatever reason, I can't get my computer to display like the errors, but what I can tell you is that the error code is CS0103. It says the name user account does not exist in the current context. That is okay. Don't panic. You're going to be like, why are we doing this right away? This is going to tie back at the very end of the program. I've already written this thing out about 5 different times now, and it's going to tie back at the very end. So just for now, just follow with me. One thing I do want to explain is, just like we have static void main right here, main with its parentheses and its argument inside, we are calling a new method here called getName. We will go over that in a little bit here too. Don't worry. Do not panic on me, I promise. So now we're going to create an object called account, and then make a method to use that object. All right, so account. We're going to call it user account, just like we labeled it up there. And then we're going to say new account. So right here we are essentially instantiating, oops, no, not new accounting example. We want new account. Why did it, don't add on. See, this is why sometimes they make things different so that Visual Studios, they label things very differently so that Visual Studios doesn't do stuff like that. And it's going to yell at you here again, cannot be found. We are going to make this later. We are essentially instantiating it right now, and we are going to call back to it in a little bit here. It's going to be mad at you. That's okay. So then next up, we're going to ask the user for the name of the account. And then let's see, then we're going to read it in. Then we're going to store it. Okay. That is going to be, the name is the name of the object. And again, these might sound crazy. Object is essentially just another word for variable. Yes and no, sort of. These things will all start to come together. So what are we going to do? Let's do a console dot write. And we're just going to say, what do you wish to name your account? And then that line like that, that's going to output, oops, output. Oh gosh, get my hands back in the right place. I got a cut on my hand, and so my hands like feel weird. Output to user to name the account, right? And then with that, we need to create a new variable, and we need to get that name. So we're going to say string, and then we're going to say user account name equals console read line. So we're going to read that line in, if you guys remember. And then that just reads, gets and reads the name, creates a string and reads the name into the string. Okay, so we've created a variable called a variable of strings called user account name, and then we're immediately going to get them to give us the name, right? We're going to read that in. They get to name it, right? After that, we have, we're going to set this. So we're going to say user account set name. Then we're going to say user account name. Right? You see how it highlights green? It's saying where the variable is. And that is going to store, oh, no. No. Store, because I didn't put the slashes, store the user account name in user account. Okay, so one thing I want you guys to make sure you're doing is, you see I'm using what we call camel casing. Remember, I talked about this in an earlier video. Lowercase, but every other word, we don't use capitals in C# because it can be, it can create it as a an object itself, an entire method itself, and we don't want to do that. So we start with a lowercase, and then any word after the first word gets a capitalization. Also makes it easier to read, because if you read it like this, nobody likes that. Oops, we hit insert. Right? And look how ugly that looks. I got a user account? What, you know? Account name. Okay. All right. So stick with me, guys. We're doing just fine. We're almost to the end of this initial program, and then we're gonna go over everything. This one won't exactly run right away, and that's okay. Again, we've got a lot of terminology to go over. So we've created a string called user account name to get the name that they're gonna name it. We're gonna store that in the user account name variable in user account. Okay, so now display the stored name in the user account object. Just like I was saying earlier, right? Although it's not one word. Silly. All right. Console.writeLine. And then we are going to, again, for variables, user accounts name is, and then those curly brackets, user account dot get name, and then that and that. Okay, now this is the same line as up here. Why are we writing the same thing twice? Again, this will be used at some point. We are doing it now because eventually we're going to loop back around in the program, and it's just going to go right to line 8 and just do that for us, and we can continue on forward if we need to create new accounts. All right? So again, you're going to be like, "Oh, this is not right. This is weird. Something's wrong." Don't worry. We're just going over terminology today. That's the point, is we got a lot of stuff going on. So let's start annotating and making some notes and understanding exactly what's going on. So before we get confused, let's go over line by line. So account, user account, right? We're doing what's called right here, account, user account. We're instantiating an object. Instantiating an object. We're kind of creating it. And now it's yelling at us that could not be found. That's why it's giving us the red squiggly lines. That's because we haven't created the method for it yet. And that's okay. Don't worry about that. We are going to come back and create the method for that soon. In the next video, though. So after we've instantiated the object, normally you would not be able to call a method of a class until you create that method. Again, we're going to come back and we're going to do that. But we are essentially we're telling it, hey, we're creating a method right here called account. So, and that user account is going to be a quote-unquote new account. It looks complicated, but once you start understanding it from the coding side, it starts to make a little bit more sense. All right, so this is just a variable, just like string, and this is the variable name, just like string's user account name. So I hope you guys are following along. It's not going to be very complicated once we keep doing this over and over, and you're going to start to see why these things work the way they work. All right. So we essentially are creating an object which we call account, then assign that object to a new variable we create called user account, right? So again, we're going to create this method here in the next video, but that'll make sense soon here. It's going to be super easy. We just need to lay the bones, so to speak, and go over the terminology. So then next up, let's go over the get name, set name stuff, right? So on the first one, you can see that it's a write line. So it's going to output, right? And it's going to output user account get name. But we haven't stored anything in get name yet. So what's it going to do? Well, the computer's going to read that line and go, hey, there's nothing here. We're going to skip this line. So it's almost as if this line doesn't exist, right? We could technically do it without this line. We're going to leave it in there for now. Because all that's going to happen is then the computer's going to go to line 11, and it's going to be like, all right, I'm creating a new account. And then it's going to go to line 14, and it's going to say, what do you wish to name your account, right? And it's just going to keep doing that over and over and over again. Well, not over and over and over again, but it's going to keep going through each and every single line. That's obviously not blank or not a comment. And it's going to finish, and then once it gets down here, it's going to display it, and it's going to be done. So let's go over the rest. So why are we calling a method that displays nothing? Again, it's going to be coming back full circle once all 4 parts of this are added in together. We're doing it now, but you're going to see why. And sometimes this might sound weird, but when you've been doing this for a while, this makes more sense than coming back and throwing it in later. It's just your brain starts to kind of hardwire into the way you know that the program needs to work. So we've talked about how it goes over code 1 line at a time. So 8, 11, 14, 15, 16, and then 19, and then we'd be at the end of main, right? Or EOM. And then we'd be at the end of class, accounting example. So once we get to the end of the main, we're done. The program doesn't run. Doesn't matter if you have 50,000 methods here. Once we get to the final line that's in main, the program ends, right? All right. So we are going to, sorry, brain fart. Gosh, sorry. If I seem like I'm out of it, it's because I'm running off of energy drinks today. So my brain is not here. You know, get brain, not get name. Jesus, nerd. Anyways, let's go over this specific set of lines right here. So we're going to output, what do you wish to name your account? It's going to prompt the user for the name. The user is going to input it with the read line. It's going to store that under user account name. We are now using the method setName, and we are passing the variable of account name to setName. So let's go over how setName works. Now you'd think getName and setName, like getName is ask the user for the input and setName sets the name. It's actually kind of backwards. SetName is what you use to get users input, and getName is what you use to call that variable. So we're calling right here, as you can see. So we need to set the variable by getting it from the user. I know that sounds really weird, and that always confused me when I first started programming. And yeah, it is weird. Just you need to understand that the people who created the language itself are smarter than us, right? That's the only way to talk about it. They are much smarter than us. All right. So let's talk about getName and setName. We talked about setName, you know. We said that setName, we're going to do like this, gets the user name and sets it as the value of the variable, right? getName calls that value. It gets the name from the variable. It gets the value, the name, right? The value of the name. Value of the variable. Okay. The reason why setName has its user account name is because we are passing this. We are saying, hey, this variable, this string we created up here, I need you to take it. And it's like handing a football off, right? So main just kind of hands the football off. Football to setName. setName takes it, sets the name, and then passes control back to main. Back to main. And then, as we look, we finish set name right here. What's the next line of code? 19. So then, main calls get name and says, "Hey, what's that variable's name? What's the value stored in the variable?" Get name then passes that back to main, and we output it all in that one single line. It back to user. So we write the line user account's name is, and then we call inside of this argument here, inside of these, we're calling the method, we're telling it what's the user account, get the name, right? It knows that the user account name is stored in the user account, right? Because we set it right here. We're saying user account is going to get this variable. Trust me, that makes sense once you start to understand it. I know, that sounds stupid. Don't at me. Guys, this is programming. It gets weird. Even when you get to high-level industries, you will have to come back and interpret somebody else's code because there's a million ways you can do this. There's a million ways. So trust me, it will eventually get easier. So get name takes the user account name, passes it back to main, and then main outputs it to the user. Right? Okay. I know. We're bobbing and weaving here. It's dip, dive, duck, dodge, dive, dodge, duck, something. I don't know. So then, once set name completes its execution, it goes down to 19. Get name completes its execution, and we reach the bottom of main, which means our program terminates. After line 19, program terminates. There's nothing left to do. We've reached the end of the main method. The program's done. And some of you are going to be like, well, we have more to do, though, don't we? We've got to do all this. Yeah. This is going to be something about 3 or 4 parts long because I'm going to go over terminology each and every time. In the next one, we're going to create a new method. So I'm going to show you real quick. It's going to look something like that. It's going to be like void account, and then we're going to put some variables in there like LOL, you're funny. And then we're going to, it's going to do a whole thing. Like that's not actually, obviously, it looks silly in comparison, but we are going to create that. And then in here, we are going to start creating our method revolving around account, and we can store tons of variables inside of account. But for now, I want you to understand that this is where we are done. Okay. There's a lot of notes, a lot of understanding. I hope I made everything as clear as possible. Things will get easier. They are very difficult, but that is kind of normal, unfortunately. You will understand the lingo, and I really hope you come back and you keep up with this, and you just give me the time to teach you, because this will get easier. I promise you. This is not nearly as hard as it seems. We will eventually get into the real hard stuff, like abstract programming, which is so much fun to me. But for now, guys, thank you for stopping by. Relax. Don't have a panic attack. We will get to this in the next one.